I have to start making change in my immediate surrounding, and I have to start living that change, and that's really the first thing I can do to create, to start to do my part in creating a new culture.
Hello everyone, I'm here with Maya Heilmann. She's one of the founders of the ecological farm in Schloss Tempelhof Ecovillage. Hello Maya.
Hey.
And we're here to open some doorways about how it really looks like to be in an eco-village, of growing our own food and doing it in a non-traditional way. So let's start as the first question. How did this farm started? What happened? Can you share a little bit about it?
Yeah, it started initially as a group of individuals around Munich who decided or had this vision of wanting to start a multi-generational eco-village project. When this community then bought the land, I wasn't part of that initial group yet. When they bought the land, which is at the time was like about 30 hectares, it was very clear, now we need to fill it with farmers. And that's how my partner Sebastian and I ended up arriving here initially. Was they had written a job description where they were looking for young farmers to come and start a farm on the property. And that was, for us, initially, we didn't have the intention, or wasn't our first, we weren't in the age where we were ready to settle yet. And so we took on the job because we thought the project was really exciting, and we really grew into the setting. We really grew into loving the community, and that's what's kept us here. We've been here now, this is our 9th year running the farm. And we've come to really cherish the synergies and the benefits of being able to some degree to close the cycle of energy, in that the energy that I as a farmer put into the land and I get back from the people who are grateful to be fed and nourished. And I think it's very unique as a farmer in this day and age to actually know, like, the kids that you're growing food for, and to know the people who are actually eating your food. It's kind of the standard that you maybe wave the truck goodbye that picks it up for the wholesaler, but it's very rare at this day and age to actually have that closed loop system.
Yeah, and I love this story, how like you saw an ad. Yeah. And you came here and
I think we might be some of the only people who've come over like a job description. And then it just fit really well.
Yeah, so for those of you who are watching and saying there's no possibilities outside to come and do something like this, it's totally possible. And I was really happy to get here and see this beautiful farm. 9 years, and there's so much richness around me, and I feel so alive, and I feel this connection between the land and what you're growing to the food I later eat. And it's beautiful to be part of it.
I think that there's something really powerfully connecting for a group of people to be consuming food from the same land that they are also land stewards of. I think there's something on a cellular...
Land steward, you mean like the guardian of the land?
Yeah, I mean, that's, since it's a cooperative, we really see this as our, also next to producing food, it's also enhancing this ecosystem, bringing this ecosystem that was once conventionally farmed with pesticides and everything back into a vital living ecosystem. And I think on a cellular level, it's really interesting. To think about, every 7 years we pretty much shed all of or have basically renewed all of our cells. And so if you think about that cycle, and if people are then eating from the same soil, which has a soil microbiome, which in effect is very related to our human microbiome, then there's something very powerful when that synchronizes, and when people then are eating from the same soil and then also caring for that soil.
when you're talking about this, I see people here from the Ecovillage, they come and they volunteer, like they have a certain amount of hours that they work in the farm. So it's not like there's people that operate in this and then there's people that eat in the food. They're like actually here working with us or with the people that work in here.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's also the connection of people from outside like me that can come and experience that and learn about this. How do you see this affecting people here or yourself and your family? Like actually being in this culture, in this next kind of culture that is taking higher radical responsibility for the land and for what we eat and this whole cycle. Like how does it translate?
I mean, I think it's extremely grounding to work with soil, to have your hands in soil. I think there's something very nourishing on a fundamental level, on a very human level, to be involved in producing your own food and to be so in touch with the seasons, with the cycles, you know, being able to observe different beneficial insects and going through their life cycle. I mean, it's very, it's, you know, we're far from it's still very much a created ecosystem. This is not wilderness. There's, you know, hardly wilderness left in Germany. And still it's a thriving, you know, it's becoming an ever more thriving ecosystem in itself with still producing food. And within that, there's still a lot of beauty, I find. And I'm always surprised at how much beauty there are when we start integrating more practices that encourage and create spaces for other, insects and birds, and we have some porcupines living here, and those are all things that only happen when we start giving them space in our landscape again. Because if you look at most of our agricultural landscapes, they're totally barren. There's no unworked space where a snake or so can lay an egg and then expect it, you know, to still hatch. And I think that's kind of part of our purpose, is creating a space that we as a community feel like, we feel alive, like you were describing, like our heart goes, you know, opens up to the diversity and the beauty, but also for other co-beings that are sharing this planet with us can also experience that, because they're not going to find that in the conventional cornfield next to us or in the wheat field that is then harvested and then stays barren the entire winter. But in a hedgerow, in an agroforest strip, in all those spaces and niches that we try and create, that's, you know, around the ponds, that's where that happens.
I love this answer because I asked you something about like how is it helping us, and you talked about how it's serving, like for example the creatures, the animal life. I'm gonna play a little bit of a devil advocate and say, like, you have this beautiful area just for yourself, and how does it really affect the world, what you're doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I truly believe that eating is a political act in this day and age, that just the fact of where does my money go to and what does it support, and what you know, what is happening to our soil, and tending the soil is also a political act. I mean, being responsible for the millions of microorganisms that are sequestering carbon and helping us responsibly care for our soil, and which is a quickly depleted resource if it's not cared for, is extremely relevant on a global scale, and I think it needs regional, local solutions, though. And I think that's something that I've become more and more comfortable with as I'm not that old, but as I grow up, is realizing that I have to start making change in my immediate surrounding, and I have to start living that change, and that's really the first thing I can do to create, to start to do my part in creating a new culture. And hoping that, through the courses that we offer, through the guests that we invite, that will get spread, and we will, not stay an island here, where we can afford to grow soil where, in other parts of the world it's more difficult. But, just the fact that 250 people around are getting fed by this farm means that for 250 people, that money is going to creating a better ecosystem that affects us all. I mean, that's, the more we learn about the interconnectedness of these processes, such as our water cycle, etc., the more we learn that it is totally relevant what happens to our local watershed for the global scale. If we start deforesting, if we start cutting down and deforesting our forests, that means that we're going to have to be importing from other countries, which are then having, which has an effect. And so starting very locally, I think, is not less value. And I think if we can't figure out a way in the West, that was, for me, one of my big realizations through my study, where I spent a lot of time in Bolivia, was, hey, wait, if we can't figure out in the West how to start consuming responsibly, then we're not going to get anywhere globally, because I fully believe that we have enough land to feed the world organically, but it also requires that we in the West start to regionally, produce our own food, to cut out transport, to cut out some of these negative externalities that occur in conventional agriculture that aren't really seen on the price tag. And so starting locally is absolutely politically relevant.
Thank you. So I hear that you're taking a stand here for this farm, and people can come here and educate, and also you cut transport, and also you kind of show the world that we're taking a stand for this. It's important and it's working. You can cut transport. You can not leave your land barren for the whole season. There is so many cycles and circles around the stand that you're taking here that are affecting like ripples all over. So I wonder if we go more specifically, what here actually works. Maybe if someone started like a small garden already in their home, or I guess it works in different scales, but what here some of the things that are making a change?
Yeah, if I had to kind of synthesize our practice, I think there's kind of 4 principles that we really try and implement on our farm that help keep the balance and help grow soil. And that's regardless of whether it's for grain production or vegetable production, because we have a diversified farm where we're growing both, as well as pasture. And those are, we want to keep the soil covered as often as possible. So for us, that means, there where we don't need to open up the soil to grow an annual crop, we want to at least, or we want to keep it covered with perennial crops. And there where we do open up the soil for annual crops, we try and work with mulch or dense planting, so that the plant itself creates kind of a mulch effect, and you see as little, like you were mentioning, as little soil barren as possible, because that's really a sign for a loss of productivity, not just looking at what we can get out of the soil, but also for what the soil organisms need to survive and thrive. They need a constant source of food, and their food comes from living roots in the form of root exudates that then get expelled from the plants to the soil. And so that's a cycle that we very much are aware of in all of our actions. So we want to keep the soil covered as often as possible. We want to increase the diversity of plants and plant families. we know there's a lot of research proving at this point that the diversity of plants above ground is very much correlated to the diversity of microorganisms below ground. And, you know, a more diverse microbiome as well as a soil biome is going to mean that you're going to have, you're going to be more resilient. You're just, you know, that's diversity often correlates to resilience. Keep the soil covered, keep the maximal diversity of plant families, keeping living roots as long as and often as possible. So for us, that means finding kind of companion cropping partners where we can maximize the time that a living root is in the soil. It also means using cover crops to a large extent, green manures, so that there where we're not growing a crop for our human consumption, we're still growing crops to feed the microorganisms, to help build soil, to then, you know, possibly later work them into the soil as organic matter. And the last point is, I have to think.
What about like materials that you use, like not using pesticides, for example, or not using chemicals?
I mean, for us, it's kind of a no-brainer that, you know, chemicals, I mean, has little to do with the fact that we're organically certified and can't use them, of course, but it would be very much against our philosophy to use any kind of substance that is destroying life, right? I mean, we're trying to stay in a living system. We're trying to move away from an agriculture that views soil as some kind of substrate where you can just kind of pump in the nutrients, and you want to keep it as sterile as possible to really keep your environment as easy, manageable as possible, because we know where that leads us. You know, that leads us down a path where you're constantly, like in Western medicine, fighting, and never going at the core cause of the issue. And so, yeah, staying away from any kind of, I mean, the problem with fungicides and herbicides is that they obviously don't just affect the one weed plant that you would like to eliminate. They affect the entire, you know, population of other plants as well as microorganisms. And that's the same with fungus. I mean, fungi and bacteria are not our enemies. You know, it's looking at, okay, how can we encourage the fungi and bacterial populations that really help the health of our soil, and they're so vital for the health of our soil. It's a total crazy idea that we would want to get rid of, you know, fungi in our soil. They play such an important role in breaking, you know, in bringing nutrients to our plants, to, you know, to creating that healthy soil food web. We need fungi, and we just want to encourage the right kind of bacteria and fungi, so the aerobic versus the anaerobic, for example. Yeah, and then the last point is that we want to disturb the soil as little as possible. So, and for us, that means really looking at, okay, what are the areas within our farm where we need to, you know, work the soil occasionally, and where can we really work, where can we transition to no-dig systems, where can we integrate more tree crops, because trees are a great example of crops that stay a very, very long time in your soil, and you don't need to disturb the soil every year to reestablish a seed bed, for example, right? So an agroforest system is requires much less soil disturbance once it's been planted and implemented. And so that's kind of the overall, like, if you had to sum it up, is soil disturbance is really the killer of our topsoil, because that, you know, as soon as we break open the natural layer that our soil wants to have, if you look at any healthy ecosystem, like in a forest or, you know, after even a landslide, nature wants to cover her outer layer. She wants to hold the soil together, because otherwise it means that we have erosion, right? We're very susceptible to wind and water processes. And so keeping that soil layer covered is extremely important and is a huge challenge, and often kind of is like with annual vegetable production or grain production is often at a juxtaposition, like keeping the soil covered but trying to grow annual crops, and finding methods, for example, like our mulched vegetable cropping, which we do on multiple hectares, where we're keeping the soil covered through a mulch, is a great example of a tool where we can have a high level of productivity.
Can you explain for 2 seconds what is a mulch?
Yeah.
For people that don't know.
Mulch is any material that you, like any dead material that you place on top of the soil to cover it. So it can be grass cuttings, it can be decomposed leaves or leaf litter, it can be wood chips, any organic matter you can think of, straw, and they're all going to have their specific uses. They're not all mulch materials are, can be implemented the same, but that's what mulch is it's covering the soil, it's helping keep the soil protected from extreme weather conditions.
Okay, and you can complete your thought if you still.
Yeah, so I was saying with the mulch field crop system, it's a great example of how kind of looking to nature as an example of where I find it always really, really powerful to just like observe how is the soil in a forest, when forests are just one example of a really healthy ecosystem often. And there's just it's almost like sponge you when you walk through a healthy forest, because you've got so many decomposing needles and leaves on top of that soil level. It's like you have to really dig to get to soil, and it's this really like nice transition between organic matter just building up at the top and then slowly being decomposed and creating soil and more organic matter coming, and that's how soil builds. And so for us, kind of like a mulch crop system is looking at high productivity within a system that is still looking to biomimicry, so to speak, or looking at nature for an example of how can we still keep her covered, keep her protected, help also the yields, increase the yields of our crops. If we didn't mulch, in many of the years where we have extreme dryness and drought-like conditions in the summer here, then we would have far less yields, because we don't have enough water in the summer to irrigate to the extent that the plants would need. And so for cabbages and celery and beets and many of our crops, that's a huge advantage then also to be able to maintain the moisture.
Great. Very helpful. I feel happy that we're doing this interview on a Sunday. And it's so quiet here. If you're wondering why nobody's working around us, it's just a Sunday. Usually,
there's many more hands here.
It's been worked. There is a new nursery that we worked on in the last few days. I had this experience of picking up beans and carrots and just like lying in the grass searching for beans, which is so awesome. Like I had fear about doing this work and coming to work here in the farm, but I did it anyways, and it's a pretty amazing experience that I encourage someone that's watching that and haven't had that experience. It's really simple. You can go to most of the eco-villages, call them, email them, like I want to do some work. If you have like a farm or a garden or something, and you can go ahead and experiment with this and learn a lot. I also had a lot of realization and metaphors around plants, just like looking at plants and being with plants. It's not this thing that they told us about in school. This is a tree, this is what it produced, like that's about it. It's really connecting to the being of the plants, because it's working with the living being. So what's not working in conventional agriculture, the damages or the problems with doing that? because we have a lot of human beings in the world, so we have a lot of people to feed. How can we do it without an extensive agriculture?
I think that's one of the largest myths that is kind of has somehow survived in modern culture, is that conventional agriculture is feeding the world, and it's just not true. Much of the energy that is put into right now into large machinery and to creating crop is feeding animals. So a lot of the food that we're growing is actually not for human consumption, and it's for energy and animals. And it's
You're talking about the meat industry.
The meat industry.
We're growing soy for feeding
we're growing corn
cows.
for silage for cows. You know, we're a large scale of our cropland is dedicated to feeding animals at this point, and that's that's one of the main problems, is that if we could reduce our meat consumption to a level that is in touch with what our with what our planet can handle, and stop feeding ruminants, so animals that have co-evolved with pasture corn, which is totally unhealthy for their digestive system, which in turn requires lots of antibiotics, etc., to be used, then we would already start to be shifting a lot of the issues that we're seeing with agriculture today.
And by the way, that's something that you see here for when you grow, for example, they have chickens here for eggs. So you see what it involves. My roommate in this building, she gets up early to open the cages for the chicken to be outside, and it's you see what it actually takes, what's the price for having that. So for example, if you have cows around, you can actually see what the cows are going through, and right now we're not seeing that, so it's easy to consume a lot of meat every day.
Yeah.
But when you actually see the price when you live in a place like that, so that's kind of part of the benefit. I just wanted to bring it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that on a more meta level, conventional agriculture, and there are obviously exceptions. There are a number of conventional farmers doing great work, and it's not like organic farmers are always the heroes. But to use still this generalization, I think that we've become so removed from a personal connection with land, and I think that is in part due to the fact that it's in Germany. I don't know the exact statistic. You have to look at it, but it's it's under, I think, 5% of our population is responsible for growing the food, and we've depersonalized land. We've really lost our personal connection to land. We no longer see ourselves as part of our environment. We kind of have created this image of, rather than a network, it's kind of like a pyramid hierarchy, and the human is on top. And I think that inevitably leads to kind of an exploitation, or that mind view leads to, not viewing soil as an integral part of our human health, but as something that we can, use to benefit us. And so I think, the larger machines get, the more depersonalized that connection to soil gets. It's very unlikely that you're going to, get off and stop what you're doing to look at the state of the soil before you drive over a piece of land, if you're on, a huge machine and have been sent out by, a farmer. Most of the people driving the machines, if they're even being, driven by actual humans at this point, are not really don't take on that responsibility, or maybe don't even have that responsibility because they're hired hands for being true land stewards, or being responsible for protecting that site. And I think that that's really a super fundamental shift that needs to happen, is that we kind of reconnect at such a level that we're emotionally connected to the land, and that we really feel that we feel, hey, it hurts to see when the soil is barren and and tilled and left to and the soil organisms are left to be burnt under the sun or rained on. Yeah.
Yeah, and you gave the example before, like that someone driving a like this huge tractor,
Yeah.
he cannot even get off
Yeah.
of the tractor,
Yeah.
and it's in air condition. It doesn't even think about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not even in tune with what is the environment around you at that point. Like there's such a disconnect. It's so different from walking even behind a horse with a plow, let alone doing it by hand, where you're having to walk behind the soil that you are working, so it's impossible not to know, oh, I'm going too deep. I'm really smearing, this is causing compaction. That's not something you see when you're on top of your tractor.
And you gave an example of you like working here and seeing when the land is more wet or something like that.
Sure. I mean, like for us, a big issue is we have heavy soils, so we have clay-rich soils, and in the spring we come out of the winter with very moist soils, and we really have to be very careful when is the soil warm enough and dry enough to be worked and to be handled. And that's something that sometimes I have to take a spade and look in the soil and see how deep is the moisture going, where are the roots stopping, what is the state of my soil at this point in time. And it doesn't mean that I can plant because on my list it says the 15th of May I'm going to plant beans. It doesn't mean that the soil is ready for that, and so it requires both really good planning and organization as well as the flexibility and observation to kind of combine that.
I heard about Schloss Tempelhof in an eco-village in the Gen conference, where there was a legend told in this like bingo game. They ask question like, which is the eco-village that take care of most of the diet, like feeding the people that lives there from the land, which is the eco-village that take care of this most. And the answer was Schloss Tempelhof. And I mean, I come here and I see it for real. And it seems like it's going well here.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's working, and I wonder also what are still the challenges in that.
I think one of the challenges that we're starting to face and will continue to face in the future is water shortage. I think that's really the main, like as a farmer, the thing that I'm the most worried about is how to deal with these approaching weather extremes that we're already seeing. I mean, we've had this summer very, very little rainfall, and we've had summers in the last 7 years that have been even less or even worse as far as amount of rainfall. And I think so on the one hand we know we have the science, we know what it needs to increase the watershed, and that is often to increase vegetation, and especially trees play a very big role. Trees and shrubs will play a really big role in making more water resilient systems. But in order to establish that, you need a lot of water. And so that's, I think, a challenge that we are facing right now, is that we are in the process of increasing the amount of trees and shrubs that we have on our property at a pretty large scale. So we have some, you'll see behind us, we have our first rows of apple trees and elderberry and pears, but our plan is to plant thousands more both trees and shrubs, and in order for those, to get established, the first 3 years are very critical, and as for them to root. And eventually, they will have a root system that will enable them to have access to water that's farther down. Mm-hmm. But for the first 3 years, it's often a very sensitive time. I see that being definitely one challenge. Will be like, okay, we know that will create a more resilient system that will also encourage. I mean, if you do it on a grand scale, if you really reforest larger areas, then you really do have that effect on the watershed, that then more precipitation will then fall in that area as it can be created through the water cycle. But that, getting there, I think, is a challenge with limited resources.
And what are the challenges that maybe you can speak about that you faced more in these 9 years of creating here around you? So maybe other eco villages that are starting something like this or are not there yet, so maybe they can take something from this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the interesting things about working within a community setting is that you really need, I mean, often the community requires a lot of energy, and farming requires a lot of energy. So for us, it meant that like the first few years of starting this farm, we were not involved in a lot of the community processes. That didn't really happen until we had a little bit of a structure that was set, and we could kind of start to spread out where our capacity was going. And I'm actually really grateful that the community didn't require us to attend all of the meetings and be involved in all of the processes, because I felt like there was this respect, or also this trust from the community that this project, this baby needed a few years of real concentrated time and energy. And so that's, I think, one thing that can often lead to people who take on this very important role of, farming for a community to and somehow be a little bit alleviated from being fully involved in other community processes, and being able to concentrate their energy for at least the kind of the birth process. And another, I mentioned it a little bit, but like not trying to set all of the ideals and goals in 1 year, and not going into burnout because I have the expectation that I'm going to be fully energy, autark, or have my own potting soil immediately, or produce all my own seedlings, all my own seed. Those are all things that for us, really, we had to put it on like a time scale, kind of like made a 5-year plan to really help us also in our also like not to constantly be asking the question to ourselves, like, when are we gonna start saving seed? When are we gonna start building ponds? To be like, okay, hey, the first years, these are the goals that we've set. We know that this is where we want to be in 5 or 10 years, but it's gonna slowly, organically grow and get, and we're gonna be able to put the ideals into practice at the pace that we also, as those holding the space, can handle. And I think, and also not taking the human out of the sustainability.
Can you say more about that?
So it's one of the principles of permaculture is to re-include kind of the social level into farming. So not creating then a hierarchy, which I've seen on some farms, where then the animals and the plants, are more important than the humans, and that's also not going to be sustainable, right? So it might be a understandable reaction against this, anthropomorphic kind of mindset, but it's not gonna go well on the long scale either if we are going over our physical boundaries on an everyday, and farming is hard work, and it's really about, creating systems and low-tech solutions to make it, to make it an occupancy that gives also energy to the person doing that. And so we put a lot of work, or put a focus into creating a space that we want to work in, right? So that it's not important to me what my garden looks like aesthetically, or that there's shade built into my garden, that there's areas where I can sit down and relax. And if you decide to farm, then it's also a commitment to spending a lot of time on a certain, in a certain place. And then I think it's really valuable to make that somewhere that also gives energy back.
Yeah, and I see it in the way that like you and Sebastian are working in a team together with the people that come here, and it really touches me. Like I wake up in the morning and we're having like a little circle, and they talk together with the people that work here for like a year or more. Like they really talk to them as partners, like what we're gonna do today, and like see their needs. It's not like they're anarchy and their worker.
Yeah.
It's really like a circle, and it's really beautiful to see. And I think for me it makes me wanna really care. Gives me space for my emotions and to really care about what I'm doing here. And it's not this ideology where I'm happy all day or like this. Like there is hard moments and it's a hard work, but it's like it gives me space to care a little bit more. And I think that's where this is going. Like this whole way of relating to the land. It's like caring a little bit more. And we talked about it before, about the way that now like children are being brought, and the this connection that we used to have we used to get it from the culture. Like I know, for example, in Jewish culture we have all these holidays that are about the land, and in indigenous cultures you have, like you can see today is much more alive, their connection, their treatment about the land.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about where you see this could go in next culture?
Yeah, I think we're in a really unique generation where, for me, I can't just like remember, because I have to go very far back in my personal history to when one of my ancestors was working the land. That's multiple generations, so I can't just remember what my grandmother did. It's going to be really something creating our new expression for gratitude for land. And so, like for example, on Tuesday you'll be there, we will have our annual harvest ritual, which we do every year since we've been here, to really just take time to give thanks back to everything that this land does for us and provides us with. And those are just, kind of, on the one hand, I mean, a harvest ritual is probably the most ancient ritual that there is. That's one of the first, every society, every small, group of humans that started to settle had this moment, and finding a way to celebrate it that, most of us can really relate to and get emotionally be connected to. Translating it into a language that that touches us. And so I think that's just one example of the kind of new rituals that we need to start to create to get back in touch and to feel that gratitude and to further deepen our connection to our big mama here.
Thank you, and thank you for taking a stand for this work. I'm just like using this space to say that, and for all the people that are involved. And I hope everyone that's watching this video could take something from it. If you have any question, let me know. Thank you, Maya. You have anything you want to say or something before we end?
Maybe just to close, like Adore, you were saying, but I think I would encourage anyone to take, a week out of their life and find an opportunity close to them to get their hands in the soil and to get closer to their food production. And it doesn't, we don't need everyone to be farmers, but I think to have once experienced that respect for what it really takes to grow food can just changes many relationships, our relationship to food, but also our relationship to soil, and that's valuable. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. All right, see you.